그치? 그치?
Okay, that's
Oh, yeah. My sincere greetings to everyone. And next 4, 5, 6 days, I'm leading this gathering. And during these 6 or 7 days, we are going to mainly focus on the understanding of the nature of our minds, thoughts, emotions, and in terms of the structure of the course, as it is scheduled, I will lead 3 classes during the day, morning from 9 to 12, some short tea break, and then afternoon from 4 to 6. I mean, here, very nice sounding, very quiet, and there seems everyone is very focused. Hopefully not to doze off, but usually when the sessions are too long, people find it quite difficult to focus. So during the, say, morning session, even before the tea break or after the tea break coming back, we may take a short break in the sense chanting some mantras and doing some short silent meditations and so forth in order to keep our concentration very fresh. And the end of the morning session before lunch, maybe 15-20 minutes, we'll see if there are some questions and we'll deal with the questions. And also afternoon, we have a 4 to 6. We'll have also questions and answer sessions. And during the question and answer sessions, or even during my talk, because English is not my first language, and also the topic itself is not that easy topic. Therefore, combination of these two, sometimes you may find it difficult to follow. And if you need some clarification and during my talk, you can raise your hand and I will try to make clear. But I will not promise whatever I say, I'm going to say very clearly. And so those are some kind of, what we are going to do and how we are going to do. And another important thing is this. Here, this is my, majority of, I think almost 99%, we haven't met before. I noticed this is there, but just, otherwise we never met before. So this is our first time. And there are 2-3 things I would like to make clear. So though I'm facing towards you, sitting in this high throne and wearing some yellow robes and so forth, here I'm not saying I'm your teacher. That's not the case. We're just a Dharma friend to learn from each other. And that is, I think, from my side, that is my, what I'm thinking here. Sitting here, I'm not thinking as your teacher. I'm just thinking as your Dharma friend. And yourself also have that kind of attitude, then we'll exchange on the topic. And that is really, I always make that very, very clear. Of course, there are there will be times, there are times, there are teachers who follow that tradition, and that's their style. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's a mistake. I'm simply trying to, do what I feel is most comfortable. And yes, I want to make very clear. And another point is, I'm sure there are some people who are relatively new coming to this kind of environment, and also, on the topic, and it is very, very important to make yourself comfortable. I noticed, and I myself did, make prostrations, and I noticed some people had, did prostrations. That is, how we do. But the people who are not familiar with that, don't force yourself, don't imitate from others. Make yourself comfortable. That is very crucial. Okay. Then when we start the class in the morning, when I come here, we will start with the short recitation, because I noticed that, first of all, the environment is a Buddhist very long-term Buddhist center. There are many very precious Buddhist statues, and some of us are Buddhists. So for that purpose, we'll start with my short explanation, saying the refuge and bodhicitta lines. There are 4 lines. I would say in Tibetan, and people who like to join with me. But once again, people who are not familiar with that, just stay quiet. Don't need to pretend you are saying that. And also, at the end of in the afternoon session, end of my session, I would like to chant 21 paragraphs. That's also usually what I do, like concluding the day. And again, that is very people who like to join, welcome. Otherwise, don't force yourself chanting. So those are the 2 things. Okay, we'll start now. Now whatever we do, physically, verbally, and mentally, daily routine activities, or some unique or special event that we participate, that we join. Our state of mind, our mind play a big role. Very intentionally or subconsciously. Subconsciously in the sense for long-term power of the familiarities, and subconsciously, our mind participate with these activities. And even from the, according to the Buddhist teachings, even during our deep sleep, there is an element of consciousness. So therefore, Buddhist teachers, and also I think it is also common sense, Buddhist teachers have emphasized deliberately try to start the day, try to start the event that we're going to participate with the positive mind. With a positive mind. Traditionally, it is called right motivation. Right motivation. And here, right motivation or positive mind, according to the individual's mental dispositions, mental capacity. Basically, we all have the capacity, or we all have the capability to hold positive mind. Here, when I use the term positive mind, I'm not talking about a specific positive mind. In general, that we all know from our own experiences, certain mental states occur that makes ourselves comfortable, that makes living beings around us feel safe and comfortable. That's what we can tell from our own experiences. So we all have the capacity, we all are capable to hold positive mind. Now the question is whether we engage in these activities, daily routine activities, or unique like this kind of gathering, whether we engage these activities with a positive mind or not, then it is whether we do it or not. Isn't it? Whether we do it or not. If we do, we are, as I just mentioned several times, we are able to engage even the routine activities like a morning. I have many Westerner friends because I lived in West quite some time. I have Italian friends, and being Italian, he loves having a small cup of coffee in the morning. When I have conversation with him, he said he doesn't need to think about I'm going to go and have a cup of coffee. That's almost already systemized in his body action and the mental action. It is because due to the familiarity, getting used from the young age all the way. So that is here, the Buddhist teachers have emphasized, very deliberately, very intentionally, try to bring positive mind in the morning. And also, during the day when we engage in events. And also before going to bed. And it is here the training comes. If we train our mind with the positive, to bring positive mind before we engage in activities, eventually that will become very much spontaneous, very much automatic. And therefore, in the Buddhist and in the Tibetan, the expression, quite often those great teachers will say, and also these amazing scriptures have written in Tibetan, it says like this: Tongdanila Chawani. Tok, ta. Tok means at the beginning. Ta means at the end. Chawani, chawa means activities or events. Ni means two. There are two activities, one at the beginning, one at the end. At the beginning with right motivation, at the end with the right dedication. They doesn't need to be a religious person to do that. Doesn't need to be a Buddhist, the motivation or Buddhist dedication. But they're extremely helpful. If we train like this in the morning when we woke up, just 2 to 3 minutes to set our motivation, how we are going to spend, the day. Very clearly and very sort of, very strongly. Okay, I'm going to spend my day like this. When majority of people, if we set that kind of motivation, how we're going to spend the day, majority of the people are able to set that motivation very positive. Maybe there might be few people, okay, I'm going to hurt these people, I'm going to cheat these people, I'm going to, that might be minority. That is also under the certain circumstances. Not naturally, not really very much their own choice, but due to the external forces, external circumstances, Some people may think that, but majority of us, no, will say, no, I'll do my best. Even if we need to do a big business and want to make a big profit, still, I will do my best not to harm others. And that is here, the important for us to set our motivation in the morning. At least minimum, intentionally, deliberately, I will not harm others. I mean, it is when they, pass morning, noon, engage in activities, bound to have some challenges, difficulties. May find quite challenging to follow the morning, setting the motivation. But if we set the motivation, it will help when the challenge occurs during the day. I set this motivation. I set this intention in the morning, deliberately, intentionally, I will not harm others. And during the day, very briefly, just few seconds, remind ourselves what kind of motivation, intention that we set in the morning, how I'm going to spend my day. Like one of my teachers used to say, used to give this nice examples. Here in the Buddha Gaya, that type of grass is here a lot. This grass, sometimes called kush grass grow under, but occasionally wherever there's a, what you call the joint comes from the ground, get the small shoots, but the main strand grows under the ground. In Tibetan, we call it Tsaramba, which grows under the ground. Wherever there's a joint, then there's small shoots come up. Very strong, usually. When we do the fire puja, there's one substance to make offering. So if we set the very strong, clear, that kind of positive motivation in the morning, that mind will stay subconsciously in our mental continuum. And during the day, just briefly, if we remind ourselves what kind of motivation that we have set, we set in the morning, that will the small shoots coming from the joints. Very, very helpful to do that. And it will take all the way to the end of the day. Then when end of the day, if we do a powerful dedication in the sense, looking back to the morning, setting the motivation, and some of the milestones, what we have done during the day. Then when we have found, okay, done relatively well, didn't contradict that much, that the motivation that are set in the morning, then whatever positive is there, to really think, this is something not just for myself, this is something for others too. That is what here, simple way to, I say, the dedication. I mean, of course, there are many different ways to do the dedication. So that's the first thing I would like to share with you in the sense of starting, how we're going to start. Of course, you already done the morning meditation. Now the class, we always start the class setting with the right motivation. So in this case, people who have who are following the teachings of the Buddha, then it is extremely helpful to set your motivation according to the teachings of the Buddha. But the people who haven't, who are not following the teachings of the Buddha, you can set the motivation. As I mentioned, we all are capable to bring a positive mind. And that's what I'm going to suggest. So here, which I mentioned earlier, we are going to start with the short 4 lines recitation. The first 2 lines, some of you know who are following the teachings of the Buddha. First 2 lines are taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, as you know, called 3 jewels. Buddha as a teacher, mentor, Dharma as a means and methods to be applied in our daily lives, to be experienced within ourselves, and Sangha as a spiritual friend and supporters. So for the very, very simple, here I'm explaining in a very simple way to people who are Buddhists, way to bring the refuge mind as our main motivation, to join this gathering is very from the heart, from the bottom of our heart, seeing, thinking, feeling the Buddha as our teacher, mentor, and his teaching, Dharma, as an application to apply in our daily lives, to experience within ourselves, and Sangha. Sangha, in a very traditional way, refers to those, the ordained monks and nuns. But here, the Sangha as people who follow the teachings of the Buddha, who apply the teachings of the Buddha in their daily life, seeing them, treating them as spiritual friends, spiritual supporters. So having that kind of mind, and starting the day, starting the class, taking refuge in 3 jewels will be extremely helpful. And also, as I mentioned earlier, similar to that, during the day, remembering, reconnecting to that mind, the Buddha as a teacher, Dharma, his teachings as an application to apply, and Sangha as a spiritual friend, to remind ourselves as a follower of the teachings of the Buddha in spending the day in that kind of mindset will be extremely helpful. And the last 2 lines are within the teachings of the Buddha. Some of us follow the Bodhisattvayana teachings, Bodhisattvayana teachings, because the historical Buddha's teachings are in a two kinds. The teachings, what normally called the Theravadan teachings, or some of the commonly practiced, taught teachings, like the 4 Noble Truths, like the 37 aspects of the enlightenment, path to the enlightenment, and so forth. So those teachings and the Bodhisattva and the teachings, and some of us follow the Bodhisattva and the teachings within the teachings of the Buddha. For those people, having the refuge as a motivation, then like if you add on, the bodhicitta in the sense altruistic awakened mind, in the sense from the heart, bottom of the heart, genuinely, sincerely thinking, caring, concerning well-beings of all living beings, not just oneself, not just few, but all living beings. Whether we are able to do, to serve all living beings right here or not, that's a different question. But from the mindset, setting that kind of motivation or the intention to serve, to work, I find a little bit awkward. I will tell you from my own experiences. When I first went to UK, that was 1993, to learn English. And a very kind family, English family, the parents and their two kids. And they kindly offered me to stay with them for 6 months. And I arrived January 1993, early January 1993. That year, there was lots of snow in UK and very, very cold. And when I arrived at the airport, Gatwick, and the family sent their two kids, their daughter, she's 14 or 15, son 12, and with the elder daughter, but she lives in London, elder daughter, but the other two kids, they live in Norwich. So they came to meet me at Gatwick, and we went by train to London, and from then need to take another train from Liverpool Street to Norwich, and packed lunch prepared, and she sent with us. And although I didn't know all these things, that detail at the time, but later I found out she gave a suggestion to the brother and sister, stay in a quiet coach, find a table, and then sit there and it is 2.5 hours journey, and have your lunch. And the two children, they try to find out a quiet coach, but that quiet coach, was not easy to find. But there was a coach which is completely empty. So they choose that, and that coach, the heating was broken down. So we sat there for 2.5 hours, have a delicious lunch, but very, very cold. But I couldn't say, or can we find another place to sit? Or they couldn't say to me. They can't, somehow they didn't say to me. And so later, after 2-3 weeks after, and the two kids, they explained how cold they, felt during 2.5 hours, and me too. So anyway, like that, you may find quite difficult, but feel it very, very, what's called, don't feel any awkward when we say those, feel it free if you want to say it, or if you don't want to say it, just feel free to stay comfortable. Okay, so now the topic that our topic is the nature of the mind. Now, the first thing I found it is important or helpful to understand the this body, and so-called, in my case, Tashi, sitting here, talking to you, and have lots of the desires, lots of fears, all sorts of things in here. And this man called Tashi. My existence is not just this body. And I can say to you, your existence is not just this body. It's a very, very sophisticated, complicated, and in certain extent, very rich, so-called consciousness or the mind. So combination of these two, Tashi is here, and we are sharing on this topic. And our life, our life, when we say, oh, I have a good life, I have a difficult life, I have a challenging life, I have a very spiritual life, whatever label that we give it that label on the basis of this body and this very complicated, very potential so-called consciousness. It is not just this body. And that's I found very, very important for us to be aware of that. And all the time to remind ourselves, my existence, and the continuation of this existence from here till death is not just this body. With this body, there's this very complicated, sophisticated, potential, so-called consciousness. Well, I'm saying that many of you may already, do this, know this, and are aware of this. But, it is from our own experiences, I found it is important to remind ourselves. Because, when we go outside and see, hear, smell, taste, and also when we think consciously, emotionally, or fears, or concerns, or joyful, most of them are related to the physical things. Not very much with the concern about the qualities of my mind, the well-beings of my mind. If I look at, I have a diary. When I look at my diary, now it's going all the way to 2026. Most of them are physical activities and doing with the physical things. Meetings. So that indicates I'm talking about myself, my sort of, the daily activities, physical activities, verbal activities, and the mental activities are mainly to sorting out, to making sure the physical things. That indicates to me my existence is very much just this physical body, not very much to my this rich, sophisticated, complicated consciousness. I may lead some retreats here and there. I may do some meditations here and there, but my meditations are very much like a robot these days. Work up, do a little bit, blah, 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 blah. Then, okay, I need to go to the side and then go and then talk to the people. And that really indicates not very much thinking about how I'm going to improve my part of my existence, if not 75% of my part of my existence. Now, if you look at it very closely, yes, this physical body is a very important part of our existence. But if you look at it very closely, our mental state is more important part of this existence than this physical. Of course, physical well-being is important, particularly when you get old. There are more and more demands. There are more and more, falling into places. So we need more attention. But so that is the first thing. Before we talk about nature of the mind, it sounds very fancy, isn't it? Nature of the mind, and particularly when you added some other, qualifications, clear light, then it all get very. But first, we all need to make sure to ourselves, my existence is not just this physical body. My existence is also, this rich and sophisticated and complicated consciousness. These two are very often overlap and very much closely, interconnected. But if we analyze, if we investigate, do the critical analysis, then we will see within these two, for the longer term, the mental that we have is more powerful than the physical. Whether when we talk about the mental state as a positive, or whether we talk about the mental state as a negative, destructive, some more powerful than the physical existence. So these are some of the, I think, the points that we need to not just, or this is what people have said. This is those great teachers have said, but we need to understand by ourselves. I had recently I was in the monastery where I was grown up, and did all my studies for many years. But then since 2018 till 2024, I was there as an abbot of the monastery. So I met, some of my classmates, not many, there were only 3 or 4 of us. And, several times we had a good time to talk, or, in the class, debating, and all those things. And here, what I've learned, after many years being together with my classmates, Then, I went to the West. Some of them stayed in the monastery. Some of them went to different parts. But we met, occasionally when I was in the Abbot, we met several times. And when we chat, and during those conversations, what I have learned, what I have understood, what I've learned during those 18, 19 years of study, we gathered lots of information from other people, from those great teachers, Indian masters, Tibetan masters, past, and also from our teachers. And we have debated in the debate courtyard again and again and again. But what I don't know what my friends have, and my classmates have found. What I found is, I haven't done that much during those periods. Really, very much looking into myself, those teachings, those profound texts that I've studied, received teachings, debated with my classmates and other, well-known scholars. But how, I haven't done that much to reflect on myself. And that is what happened. That kind of reflection was happened during my time outside the monasteries in the West mainly. So the, very sincere sort of, like here, what I'm talking about here, point what I'm raising here is our existence is not just this body. We have a rich, sophisticated, and complicated consciousness. I'm saying this again and again, and it seems majority of you are responding or agreeing what I'm saying. If that is genuine agreement, if you really agree with that, or you're just very politely. So this is something we need to think about. And I'm just sharing my points, and you need to do the work, whether it's true or not. That's one of our points is, during these 6 or 7 days, I think might be the last one. Buddhist way of, or not necessarily Buddhist, ancient Indian way of learning is these 3 stages: listening, reflection or contemplation, and meditation. Meditation in the sense application, applying what you have found at the reflection, reflecting what you have heard from the teacher, from the text. So that is really, really, I found very important way of learning, not just intellectually, eventually what we have learned, applying in our daily life. Then we will see the benefits of learning. A lot of English words, which I already have used once, imitation, mimicking is not very helpful, particularly when we are, working with our thoughts, emotions. If we mimic or if we sort of, repeat after or copy from others, it will not work. It won't be that productive. It won't be that useful. Therefore, useful to understand from your own, the reflection, through your own reflection, through your own analysis, the two points I raised now. Our existence is not just this body. There's another important part. And within these two, although taking care of our physical body well-being is important, if it is more important, but equally it is important to taking care of our mental states. And that needs to be convinced to ourselves, through our own analysis or investigations. Then the next point is, here, again, I'm talking about from my own life experiences. We take many things for granted. We have a difficulty to appreciate how fortunate, how lucky, if you use that term, that we are. Using the traditional, particularly traditional Tibetan Buddhist terminology in here, although it's not, unique in Tibetan language. Nagarjuna, this great Indian master, Nagarjuna, had used many times. Our current existence, this combination of mind and body, is called precious human existence. Precious in the sense, based on this mind and body, human mind and body, we can do amazing things for ourselves and for others. In that sense, the Tibetan term is used, Melu Rinpoche. Melu means human existence. Rinpoche means precious. Precious human rebirth. So the point is that, as I just used the term earlier, this English expression, take for granted. That's very much, our habit. It's my habit. So because of that kind of habit, I missed many, many important things in the time, from the time case, from the time's point of view. I mean, just a few days ago, I was in Bangalore, in South India, and I met one of my not monk friends, met another friends in Bangalore. We know each other since school time, and he had two granddaughters. His later. So we talk about the productive of our lives. I said, you are more productive. You have a wife, you have two daughters and two granddaughters. I'm just single. I haven't contributed anything for the population, Tibetan populations, and so forth. So time passes like that. Time does not stay still. But we don't think that much. Like this so-called precious human existence that I have right here now, which I, passes minute by minute. So that is something, for us every now and then to remind ourselves how fortunate, how lucky that we are, that I am. Although life is not perfect all the time, there are ups and downs. That's the nature of life. If our life is all the time high, that might be very, very boring. Because there are downs, when we have a high time, we appreciate it. So it is very, very helpful. And some of these, of course, these great teachers, like great Arjuna, in his precious garden, he repeated again and again, the human existence is something very, very unique within the billions of different species on this planet. Human existence is unique existence. Unique in the sense that we can do tremendous positive things to ourselves and to others. And that is, we need to reflect on and to remind ourselves and to utilize this existence at its most, what you call that, in terms of the time, in terms of the potential, and very, very useful to having that kind of thought. The other ways, particularly last, 10, 15 years, there are lots of, the unfortunate events taking place. Overall, I'm talking about. And that may overwhelm our mental state. Because many of these big unfortunate things, we can't do that much apart from praying. Apart from that, we can't do that individually. We can't do that much. Of course, prayer is, so we may find very much negative, the destructive within ourselves, around ourselves. So sometimes reminding ourselves, having this mind and body, human existence, is something very, very unique, precious, great potential it has. So that is something useful to reflect on again and again. And plus with that, this will not last forever. That fortunate, that lucky that we are and that we have will not last forever. And this statement, it will not last forever. This is not what in English is called, it is not scaremongering. It is reality. Nature of the impermanent is reality. It is not scaremongering. It is happening all the time. So reflect on the combination of these two. Fully aware of, based on this human existence, we can do tremendous positive things to ourselves and to others, and this potential will not last forever. Reflection on these 2 points will be very, very helpful for us. Anyway, so those are some of the general points I would like to share before we talk about nature of the mind. That first of all, our existence is not just this physical. It has another half part. And this half part, consciousness, emotions, thoughts, it has a tremendous power in our existence, positively as well as negatively. Then the next point is that this human existence that we are is tremendously, what you call the precious, in the sense we can do so many positive things to ourselves and to others, and this will not last forever. So those are the 4 points. Occasionally I would like to request you to reflect on. Don't need to be Buddhist, to reflect on these points. Don't need to be Buddhist, but these are very, very helpful reflections that you can do, and to make this life very, what you call the fresh, very, active, in the sense to do the positive things. Now then, with these things, these 4 points that I've shared with you, now when we talk about nature of the mind, first of all, the subject, the topic that we are going to talk is not something outside, as we all know. It is here, within us, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time. Since we, conceived in our mother's womb, and according to the Buddhists, and also some other, ancient Indian spiritual traditions, even before that, certain degrees of, certain levels of consciousness, even before we conceive in our mother's womb. So that we don't need to go somewhere to understand the nature of the mind. It is within ourselves. It is not third parties analysis. Many of our current analysis, or and particularly those lab, the analysis examinations are done with the third party. And here is the first one. Person, oneself, ourself, within us. Subject itself is relatively elusive consciousness. What is it? But from the Buddhist understanding, it is within ourselves, and of course, in the Western, the slightly different way to present, classical Western philosophy, it is within ourselves, it is mind, but modern may go a little bit different. It is part of our brain wave or whatever, but it is here within ourselves. Now, then, to understand our consciousness, its function, due to the function of the consciousness, it affects the results. To understand that, then we need tools. And the tool here is the tool is meditation. Through meditation, although these days there are some, technologies to put many things in here, there, they may check where the waves are going and like that. But these are just, checking our consciousness, the state of our consciousness from the monitor and where the beeps are going, where those, side, what you call the things are going. But here we are talking about from outside, to understand the consciousness, the nature of the consciousness, the function of the consciousness is through meditation. Through meditation. So during this week class gathering, I will talk on the meditation in a different stages, the different stages. But here today, first I would like to say a little bit, meditation. Meditation in the sense, what in Sanskrit it is called bhavana. Bhavana in Tibetan is called gom, and in English, translated as meditation. To nowadays, that is the what you call the agreed term, but it seems early 19th century or early 20th century, the people who are, particularly Westerner scholars, who are trying to translate from the Sanskrit Pali term into English, they struggle a lot, it seems. What term is really carries all the connotations, all the functions of this term in Sanskrit called bhavana. Now it's more or less, agreed, the term meditation. So therefore, I think that, there's no doubt to understand the consciousness, to work with our consciousness, to deal with our consciousness, to enhance the good qualities of the consciousness, to reduce destructive consciousness, to ease meditation. There's no debate. Now then, how to apply the meditation and what is meditation? Those are the things that I'm sure many of you know, but I'm going to say a few words on that first. Tibetan term gom, it has active connotation. Also, it has passive in the sense just the name, not the action, but it has both connotation. Gom. Kombache is another term. Kombache, familiarize with it. That's a more active term. Gom, it has a passive in the sense just the word, what the name. And when we talk about meditation, we need to understand the both, the active connotation of the term, as well as just the name, the means it in Tibetan is called. Now here the active is more important. They quite often in English, familiarize. So how to familiarize, or familiarizing with our mind, with our consciousness, with our emotions and thought, here is basic meditation. To familiarize, to get used to, to understand, nature of the mind, nature of the consciousness. So this is here the meditation. And in this case, to do that, the first the qualities that we need in our mental state or within ourselves is, the physically, not too active, mentally not too, busy, some certain degrees of quietness, certain degrees of calmness needed to, to familiarize with our consciousness, to familiarize with our mind, thoughts, and emotions. In that sense, then, sometimes, particularly for the beginner, retreat is quite helpful. Physically, it may, physical activities less sort of, the busy, and also mentally, particularly if you go somewhere in a particular place like this, then to bring a degree of quietness. So, what we need to do, the simple meditation, what we need to develop within our mental continuum, stillness and the clarity. Those are the two qualities that we need to develop to do the meditation, if I use first this term, or to familiarize, with our minds, with our consciousness, nature of the consciousness, nature of the mind, whatever term that we use, we need within our mental continuum, within our mental state, the quality of stillness and the clarity, or calm and the clarity. These two qualities need to be cultivated, developed, enhanced. We have those qualities. Majority of us, these two qualities are very much in a dormant. We don't, utilize them. We don't activate them. Therefore, they are more in a dormant state. What we need to do, we need to bring them in a more active level. Those two qualities, stillness or calm and clarity. So to do that, then, in the early stage of the meditation, to activate or to enhance, to cultivate these two qualities in our mental continuum, then, simple, sitting or walking meditation is very, very helpful. Either placing your attention to your breathing, or placing your attention on the particular chanting, or simply observing to the present right here and now. That form of simple meditation will, enhance these two qualities, stillness and the clarity. We will come back more what is the meaning of stillness, what is the meaning of clarity. We'll come back again and again these things. But these two will be qualities will be extremely helpful to familiarize ourselves with our nature of the mind, with our nature of the consciousness. Yeah. So during this course, and also in the coming weeks, months, years, to, you don't need to do long hours of meditation to enhance these two qualities. Just 10, 15 minutes in a regular basis will help. Not just like a 1 or 2 weeks very intensive, then few months nothing, or few years nothing. That will not do. But just 10, 15 minutes, like in a regular basis. I'm not saying every day, because these days life is very busy. Very difficult to keep our mobiles away from us. So it's not easy, but it is doable. If we carry on like 10, 15 minutes, for the meditation to enhance stillness and the clarity, just focusing on your breath, or just being to the present, right here and now, will help to enhance these two qualities. These two qualities are the basic mental qualities to do the meditation. Whatever follow-up meditation, sophisticated, very powerful meditation that we do, our mental state needs these two qualities. And these two qualities will enhance through the meditation, not just pure devotion or faith or prayer. They are helpful, but need to do the work. Can be do with walking meditation, sitting meditation, body posture, which provides the base to do the 15 minutes meditation. Doesn't need to be sitting all the time. Doesn't need to be sitting in a very traditional, lotus posture. You can sit on a chair, you can sit, but wherever you sit, that sitting area or sitting place should give you to do the meditation, not provide you to doze off. Sometimes when we sit on a very comfortable place, instead of the meditation, we have another part, other part of our mental state. So that is really something important tools to understand the nature of the mind. So now we are approaching 10:30. Shall we have a short break? Yeah, 15 minutes tea break. Is that okay? Okay. Have 15 minutes tea break. Come back 11:15. Yeah. We are going to start this second session, and we'll start with me chanting 6-syllable Avalokiteshvara mantra, just to bring our attention back to the whole and back to ourselves. In the previous session, I was talking about the stillness and the clarities of the qualities of the mind is important. So to people who have already stillness, qualities of the stillness and the clarity, once again to raise those two qualities of your mind. And the people who are relatively new, either you will just focus on your breathing to bring your attention to right here and now, or you can just focus on my chanting. Although I don't have any good voice, it might be irritating, but it will be fine. Sometimes focusing on the irritation is also useful. So, okay. Mm-hmm. Mane me Oh yeah, thank you. In Buddhist classical texts, Buddhist classical texts are divided into three categories. The category of Vinaya, which these texts deal with the monastic code of conduct, Vinaya. The second classical group is called Abhidhamma, and that group of texts deal with the different types of consciousnesses, different types of meditations, different types of world systems, different the explanation of the existence of the external things and events, and all those subjects are dealt from this group called Abhidhamma. So our topic, goes into the second. And the third group is called, wisdom or ya, the Sheltila. So these three, sometimes called three Tripitaka, then Sum in Tibetan, then Sum, three Tripitakas. So currently in Bodh Gaya, there are people reading the three Tripitakas in Pali tradition. And so that way of the historical Buddhist attributed to the historical Buddha's teachings, which is very nice to look at the text into these three categories. And also, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is originally heavily dependent on ancient Indian great masters, the commentaries like great Nagarjuna, Asanga, Chandrakirti, Dhammakirti, all the way down to 11th century, Atisha, Kamalashila, and so forth. These great Indian masters' commentaries are very, very important literature or classical texts to study. And on top of that, then of course, around 7th or 8th century, when Buddhism, came to Tibet, then over the, until up to now, there are many great Tibetan teachers have written many commentaries. So in terms of the literature, it is extremely rich, literature. And in this particular topic that we are going to study, Abhidhamma texts are in the historical Buddhist texts, and also Abhidhamma texts, commentary written by the Indian masters and so forth. Then within there are other texts in Tibetan Buddhism, like the Dhammakirtis, Dhammakirti and Master Dignak. Master Dignak and Dhammakirti's texts are extremely helpful to understand, the function of the analysis, how the analysis are done, and through the analysis, how the wisdom is cultivated, and so forth. The text itself, like Dhammakirti's text, there are 7 treatises. The one of the major treatises is called, Pramana Vadika, the valid cognition, which is a very, very important text to be studied to understand, at what level that we can say my understanding is correct understanding. My understanding arrived at the right, valid level, not mistaken, not confused. So those are the really important texts to be studied in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and also within the Abhidhamma literature. These 2 brothers, Asanga and Asanga and Paspandu, they have written quite rich literatures on the Abhidhamma area. So that in terms of the literature to explain the mind, consciousness, and so forth is very, very rich. In general, Indian, ancient Indian literature. And here I'm talking about what I'm a little bit familiar with the Buddhist literature. So, as His Holiness Dalai Lama says very often, in terms of the resources to understand the nature of the mind, the function of the mind, the varieties of the mind, different levels of the function of the consciousness, the ancient Indian, the masters have amazingly, the detailed and very rich explanation and so forth. So that is something, nowadays many of these texts are translated into different languages, particularly into English. So, I remember when I first moved to London, to try to find out some of these texts. It's very, very rare, but nowadays that's not the case. So, people who like to study these rich literatures on this subject is, something you can think about. And so now, what is the purpose of learning the nature of the mind? What's the purpose? There must be purpose. There must be reason. And particularly reason must Masala, I'm talking about to Masala, I'm not forcing you people. The reason must be, something to bring a positive within ourselves and around ourselves. And that must be the reason to learn the nature of the mind. Of course, it will be fine. I used to say when I was in London, and I'm sure you know these things in the West. There are many men. Also, there are few women I've seen, but many men. They're going with these fancy chairs, fancy, the tent, and with this long, initially I thought what they are carrying, but later I found out, what you call for the fishing. Yeah, and a very fancy bag in the early morning, and they were just there in front of it, small lake, and just there. And sometimes particularly in England, in the UK, where there's very unpredictable, most of the time very cold, wet, and the food, and then rain like that. So I tend to tease the people who come to my classes in the evening. They will know, saying, if you come here just to avoid your wife or husband, annoying you all the time, if you come here, that's also fine. You can just sit here 1.5 hours, just listen. Then I say the story, because people who go there, just avoiding their house chores, works, and otherwise to pay huge money to buy these tools and sit in it very cold and wet. So, that's the main reason you come here, to avoid to annoy your girlfriend, boyfriend, or wife or husband. That's also fine. But here to learn what's the purpose of learning the nature of the mind. That we need to make very clear to ourselves. So from the Buddhist point of view, the learning the nature of the mind is really to work with the mind. Through working with the mind or consciousness, enhancing those constructive side of the consciousness or the mind, and try to minimize those destructive aspects of the mind, of the consciousness. And that is the main reason from the Buddhist point of view. And that, when I use the term enhancing, why we need to enhance those constructive aspects of the consciousness. Because moment we start to experience those constructive states of the mind in many different layers, we can talk about compassion, we talk about what you call the love, we can talk about equanimity, patience, all those terms, but it's from our own experiences, not using these terms, this is love, or this is compassion, this is altruism, not labeling like that, but from our own experiences. Certain states of mind, when they arise, when they occur, arising that certain states of mind that makes individual very calm, relax. There are that aspect of the mind, that kind of aspect of the minds within ourselves. Whatever label we give it, that's the difference. But from our own experience. But there are also another side of the mind or consciousness is just simply occurring that mind that make us very uncomfortable. Even nobody's around us. Even the environment's very calm, peaceful, but certain states of mind arise that makes us very uncomfortable. And that's here the term I'm using, constructive and destructive. Currently, I'm not using any particular Buddhist jargon like the afflictions or defilement. I'm not using those things at this stage. I'm just simply using something that we all can experience in our everyday life. So, the Buddhist understanding about the mind, it is very, very flexible nature. It is not rigid. It is not fixed. From, as its nature. I mean, when we talk about nature, we can talk about nature of the mind in many different aspects. And currently I'm talking about its flexibility nature. It is extremely flexible. In that sense, we can enhance those constructive. We can reduce those destructive, because constructive aspects of the mind is, not completely ingrained with our mind. Same as the destructive. We can make work with these two. So in the Buddhist the text, very often, some they make this kind of statement, saying that taming the mind, sem tulwa, sem tulwa, sem shiva. Sem tulwa means your mind is extremely, like one of my teachers used to give this analogies, that this very rich manure, natural manure, which has very soft and very rich, not very sticky, not very like that, very semtulwa. For example, another term in Tibetan we use satulwa. Satulwa means the ground is extremely rich and, what you call the rich, semtulwa. Shiva, calm. So for us to make our mind, or the term, whatever you use, consciousness, to make very rich, make very calm, is the purpose of learning the nature of the mind. So then we can talk about the meaning of the, richness, meaning of the calmness. Then there are many different degrees of calmness we can cultivate. Many different layers of richness we can develop. One of the texts that which I have got here, nicely stated in Tibetan, it says like this: "Simple one lepade, simple one devatin. Sem means consciousness or the mind. Sem to, that means either calm or rich. Sem to. There's also another term, tamed, T-A-M-E-I-N. Tame your mind. Like a very nice analogy is giving, taming the tiger. This very wrathful, very powerful very forceful tiger. If you, train and tame, make calm, make very gentle. So sometimes term is used, taming the tiger. Pulua. So for me, one of the most, powerful impression in this Tibetan term, pulua, richness, to make your mind rich. Sindulvani, lepade, excellent. If your mind is very rich, the individual feels very, very, comfortable, very, very, resourceful. Many of us, for example, when we face a situation that we start to lose our temper, get angry. The reason is we are not rich in the resource to deal with that situation. And our method to deal with the situation is our old method, just to show the anger. That is sign of lackness of richness in our mental condition. So Simdulwani lepate, if our mind is very rich in terms of its understanding, in terms of its the cultivation and so forth, then the individual feels very in others excellent. In English it says taming the mind is excellent. Then the next line, Simdul Vai Devatin. Simdul Vai. Once our mind is tamed, due to that, it brings joy. It brings joy. Sincere, genuine, long-lasting joyfulness that we experience through the taming the our mind. Taming in the sense, not letting go our mind with old habits, anger, jealousy, envy, all those destructive mental states. So that is here, we should, it is helpful to remember the purpose of learning the nature of the mind is to really, make this mental state, consciousness, resourceful, rich, and through that, individual will experience joy, calm, and all those good qualities. All those good qualities. Then of course, people who follow the teachings of the Buddha, and that is the main aim the Buddha had given all his teachings in this short verse, which quite often chanted, quite often recited, saying Dikpachiyam Mijashi Gyawa Pusum Sokache Rangi Semni Onsudur Dinisanje Dembayi. Not engaging any form of harmfulness, non-virtues, Dikpachiyam Mijashi Gyawa Pusum Sokache, all the time, engaging or working to enhance virtues, excellent virtues. These are the two activities. And these two activities will come, this third line. Rangi Simni also do, tamed one's own mind completely tamed one's own mind. Dina Sangye Tembahi. That is the teachings of the Buddha. So the essence of the teachings of the Buddha is really through taming our mind, taming in the sense, to enhancing those constructive mental states, emotions, thoughts, reducing, minimizing those destructive, unhelpful, unhealthy mental states, emotions, and thoughts. Through that, our behavior in Tibetan Jalam, Kosumdi Jalam, the behaviors of the three doors, that means body, speech, and mind, not engaging in unwholesome, unhealthy activities, and engaging or involving, enhancing wholesome activities. So those 4 lines really captures the essence of the teachings of the Buddha, and that really goes back to our topic, that the learning the nature of the mind. The purpose of the learning of the nature of the mind is to tame our minds, thoughts, emotions, and through that individually and collectively to experience excellent joy and joyful. So that is something important to bear in mind. The purpose of the understanding, learning the nature of the mind. So try to remember that the purpose. Now, in the literatures that I have mentioned earlier, the literatures that are attributed to the historical Buddha, and also literatures that written as a commentary by those great Indian masters, and the Tibetan teachers that I'm talking, my background. Here, the 3 terms are used, but very often they say these 3 terms are synonymous, but have a slightly different terms. In Tibetan, Lo, Sheba, Rigpa. Lo, here in Sanskrit it is called Bodhi, and Sheba, Gyan, and Rigpa in Sanskrit, Sampati. Don't take my Sanskrit terms. I'm not a scholar on that area, not at all. I'm just mentioned earlier, I'm mimicking or repeating those people's scholars' terms. So, law, cognition, in English, and Sheba, consciousness, and Ripa, awareness. So those are the 3 terms in the literature, Indian literatures, as well as Tibetan commentaries, treat as a synonymous. Different terms, but referring to the same thing. Different terms referring to the same thing. They all share what you call the 2 main characteristics. That is what you call its nature. Nature is shared. All these 3 terms share the nature. Nature is clarity, clear, or luminosity. But these are the terms, Ursula, luminous, luminously clear. Those are the terms. Session. Then Rigpa. That the second term has the qualification or qualities of the mind that refers to the function of the mind's consciousness, awareness, whatever term. The function is be aware of the object, knowing the object. And that's the function of the mind's, the term consciousness or the awareness or, the cognition, whatever term that you use. In Tibetan, law, sheva, rigpa, law, cognition, sheva, consciousness, rigpa, awareness. But these are three different terms, but they are synonymous. Now the qualities or if I use the term, there are two qualities. The first quality is the qualities of the nature. The nature of these three is, luminously clear, or sometimes the just term used clear, clarity. That is from their point of view of their nature. Then the second section, Rigpa, awareness. And this is very much, talking about from their functions. Functionally, they're all, aware of the object, aware, knowing the object. Whether they're knowing the object correctly or not, that's the difference. But knowing the object. So that is something useful to remember. Okay. Now here these three terms: cognition, consciousness, and awareness. In English, over the years being in UK and leading these kind of classes, when we talk about, when we discuss, and then different languages bring slightly different connotations. And you may, in Hindi, people who speak Hindi may have a slightly different in these three terms, and Dutch or German or anything like that. But commonly the term is used here is consciousness. Awareness is quite often, as in the Tibetan literature, it's explained from the functional point of view of the mind or consciousness. And also the term awareness, sometimes, in the Tibetan, particularly in the Tibetan traditions, it brings, little bit deeper sort of understanding or explanation of the mind or consciousness, awareness. Particularly the term, Tibetan term, Rigpa, in the Nyingma tradition. As you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are four major Buddhist schools. The Nyingma tradition, Rigpa, awareness, has a tremendously rich explanation in that case. But here we are dealing with it just in the Abhidhamma literature, as I mentioned earlier. In the Abhidhamma literature, all these three terms are mentioned, but they are mentioned as a synonymous, not something different. But those synonymous, but in the Tibetan, these three terms, law, Rigpa, Sheva, Rigpa, they all these different terms give us, slightly different taste or meaning, or not the different meaning of the consciousness, mind as a whole, but slightly different, the taste. And that is quite useful. And why I'm saying this is, in English, all these three, cognition, consciousness, and the what you call the awareness, when you think about, when you discuss, it's sometimes quite good to discuss what kind of not the terminology, connotation that you get, or impression that you get from that particular term, and then it's good to discuss in the discussion group, and from the people who are coming from different background, have a different language. Sometimes good to, put in your understanding from your language, equivalent of consciousness, equivalent of awareness, equivalent of cognition, and then bring to the discussion. That will make rich discussion. Yeah, that's one thing which quite useful to know. Now then, here this term luminously clear, or just use the term selva, clear or clarity. The term luminously clear. This term, selva, in the literatures, now I'm going to add another literature which I have not, I didn't say it before. In Buddhist literatures, particularly in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, as you know, we have literatures common to the Theravadan traditions. Like there are several important texts, particularly the Vinaya texts and the Abhidhamma texts, which are common to the Theravadan traditions. And also in the Tibetan Buddhist literature, there is a very big collections of what you call the Bodhisattvayana teachings, sometimes called Mahayana Bodhisattvayana teachings, and plus there is there are lots of literatures on the Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana teachings. So now here, why I'm adding the last bit, Vajrayana, or sometimes term is used, Buddhist Tantrayana, Tantric teachings. Here, because certain explanation about the nature of the mind, particularly subtle levels of the nature of the mind, which are not mentioned in the earlier two groups of literatures which common to the Theravadan, literatures in the Mahayana, and here Mahayana or the Bodhisattvayana and the Vajrayana. Which is not certain explanations which are repeatedly explained in the Vajrayana, but never mentioned in the earlier two groups. And that comes from this, in Tibetan term, selva, which in English translated luminously clear, or luminously clear. Luminosity, I don't know what is the right, the proper English. So that is here in the Vajrayana literature. There is a rich explanation and a rich practice to experience that levels of nature of the mind, which is self in Tibetan, in English, luminously clear. This 7 days course will not going to say that much on that part of the explanation. We are more staying in the first two groups of the literature. The common to the Theravadan literatures, common to the Theravadan, and the Bodhisattva literatures in the Bodhisattva teachings. So that is something I may briefly touch every now and then to the literature, the explanations, literature from the Vajrayana. That's I may do that occasionally, but they're not going to go any detail on that. Okay. Now then, in the literature which is common to Theravadan and the Bodhisattva, which is here I'm referring to the the Vinaya basket or Vinaya literature. There are statements. There are statements which I'm going to say in symbol. Not written down there, but anyway, in the Vinaya text, there are statements saying that the nature of the mind is luminously clear. There are these kind of statements in the Vinaya literatures, which is common to the Theravadan. And now then the next literature is the Bodhisattva literature, sutra, which is in Tibetan called Langar Shekpa, traveling to the Langar land, that particular sutra. There's also in that sutra, it clearly stated, the nature of the mind, again and again stated, the nature of the mind is luminously clear. Very, very almost identical statement that we come across in the Vinaya Sutra or in the what you call the Bodhisattva sutras, Langabhadra Sutra and Langashipadom. So then in the literature refers to Maitreya, refers to the attributed to the Maitreya, which is called sublime continuum, Gyulama in Tibetan. Then there are these repeated again and again, the nature of the mind is luminously clear, and then gave many examples. Then another literature is, as I mentioned earlier, the Dhammakirti's valid cognition, and there are also these kind of statements saying nature of the mind is luminously clear. So now I'm going to deal with, according to these literature, what is the meaning of luminously clear? This I'm going to say a little bit on that. Luminously clear, nature of the mind is luminously clear in the sense, all these, what we experience in our daily life, joys, happiness, fulfillment, fear, concern, and hope, and so forth. The love, compassion, or on the other hand, anger, hatred, attachment, all these, the varieties of mental states that are operating, at the surface of our consciousness, according to the different conditions, according to the different circumstances. These all are not one with our consciousness. These all are, the sort of some form of manifesting, arising from the mind, but these are not the nature of the mind. And the Tibetan term is used, negative advantages, English term, advantages. All these, whether they are constructive, like a love, compassion, altruism, or they are destructive, whether they are destructive, anger, hatred, attachment, jealousy, all these bubbling, emotions, thoughts bubbling in our mental continuum, these are advantageous. These are not one with our consciousness. So in that sense, then the next question is, then what is? If we take it away, all these, the bubbling things, the hope, fear, all these things. If we take it away, all those things, what is there as a consciousness? What's left there as a consciousness? Then this term, luminously clear is there. That's only left as consciousness. So quite often the term, the statement is made saying that, the nature of the mind, fundamental nature of the mind. There are these kind of levels are explained. Fundamental nature of the nature of the mind. So here we are talking about the nature of the mind. What is there after all these varieties of the emotions, thoughts that we experience, if they are not one with our consciousness, then what's there as a consciousness? Left as a consciousness, left only that kind of luminously clear. These all are advantages. They are not one with our consciousness. So this is something that we need to analyze, need to examine whether our, through the effort that we cultivate love, compassion, altruism, or due to our old habits, like the degrees of grasping, degrees of anger, all these, whether these are really, part, what you call one with our consciousness, or whether they are different. They are not one with our consciousness. As a consciousness, there's this pure, luminously clear. Is there or not? That's the one thing that we need to discuss. We need to learn. And in that sense, then, the learning about different kinds of emotions, different kinds of thoughts, different kinds of thinking minds, analytical minds, and so forth is extremely helpful. So therefore, in the Abhidhamma literature, there are these class or the group of consciousness is explained, like saying the omnipresent mind, saying the variety of mind, saying the 21 secondary affliction, and 6 root afflictions, and 11 virtuous mind, and so forth. There's lots of there are many different kinds of consciousness or the mind is explained in the Abhidhamma literature. And that is extremely helpful for us to learn those things, to understand the nature of the mind, the nature of the mind. It is nature of the understanding of the nature of the mind will not, as far as I understand, understanding of the nature of the mind or fundamental nature of the mind, these deeper, and to understand the deeper levels of the mind or fundamental nature of the mind, then first we need to understand these varieties of the minds, how they function, how they work, and what's related, these varieties of the mind related to the nature of the mind. And that's which I thought we are going to talk in the coming days. So I'm going to leave it here. We have 15 minutes if you have some questions.
The luminous gravity that you mentioned, is that also sometimes what we hear they talk about the nature? Is that the same thing?
Okay. So I have the text which quite often used for study Buddha nature, which I briefly mentioned. That is the sublime continuum, Kulama. And this, another, before I answer directly to your question, I added another term, do you remember? The fundamental nature of the mind, instead of saying nature of the mind. So now, your question is the luminously clear referring to the nature of the mind? I will, for the time being, I will use, I will answer is not the nature. It's not the Buddha nature. It is related to the Buddha nature, which we will discuss this a little bit during our discourse. But the luminously clear itself, at this stage, I would say it's not the Buddha nature. We will talk on that coming days. Yeah.
You mentioned in the beginning of your talk when you discussed stillness, calmness, and clarity, and you talked about the text and the understanding of the text. And you made a comment about recognize or understanding whether the text is correct. How do you recognize whether the text, whether the understanding is correct? And what do you mean by the word correct?
Okay. Now, in the West, in particular, I'm talking about in English language, the term is used knowledge. The knowledge. So my understanding, the knowledge is more like a static, not process. In the Buddhist, in the ancient Indian, literatures, here the term is used jnana, wisdom, equivalent to the knowledge. It is process. Knowledge, the different in the different stages. So now that why I'm bringing this is correct understanding, or another term is a valid understanding. So here in English, knowledge, you are more or less in English term is a valid cognition or correct understanding, knowledge. So now in the Buddhist literature, now I'm referring to particularly Indian Buddhist literature, this great two masters, Digna, 4th century, Dhammakiti, 6th or 7th century, Common Era. These two masters were very, very important masters, and their writings are very, very important texts to understand how the wisdom or the knowledge is cultivated, developed. In others, valid or correct. Understanding can be wrong. So how to define such understanding is correct or valid? Using the term in English equivalent to the Tibetan term sama. That is in English translated as valid. So this will, I think, will come in the day 3 or something like that. I'm going to touch on that, how the valid, correct understanding is cultivated, gained.
So are you equating correct with validity, with valid?
Yes, at this stage I'm using as a saying, equivalent, the valid knowledge, yeah.
So you mentioned hatred, anger, and such other things are not manifestations of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So does it mean that constructed habits like of nature, like love, compassion, they are luminously clear?
Now if you look at individually, now when we say the nature of the mind, we are talking about more basic, nature of the mind. When we say that, we are talking about the fundamental or I won't use the substantial. Anyway, the general states of the state of the consciousness. When we go into individual, but then if you take it away the individual, what is left here within you, within me, as a consciousness? When you take away the individual, I'm saying on the one hand, love, compassion, altruism, all those constructive ones, including from the Buddhist point of view, including the minds of the Buddha, which is amazing. And on this side, destructive or the attachment, anger. If we take it away, all those, what's left here as a consciousness? Then this is what we are talking about, luminously clear. Now, these bubbling, constructive and negative, the destructive, they took place, or they are taking place within us due to the circumstances, due to the conditions. But that the basic, the nature of the luminously clear is the nature of the mind itself, nothing, not by the circumstances, not by the environments, not by the external causes. The love, compassion on the one hand, and attachment, anger on other, taking place, arise within us due to the circumstances, due to the conditions.
So luminously clear is beyond those two.
I would say beyond, or they are luminous, and luminously clear is the foundation or the base, which is the mind itself, which is the consciousness itself. Okay, yeah.
Rinpoche, would you say luminosity is more like a mirror or a lamp? If you want to give a...
Okay. If you say mirror or lamp, then it is, it carries only half part of the nature of the consciousness. Another part of the nature of the consciousness, or the nature of the consciousness, is functionality. That is, the awareness. The mirror, as in the example, mirror or the lamp example, it gives only the half aspect of the mind or the consciousness. It has a functional, the what you call the aspects.
So luminosity has a functional aspect.
It's definitely, it has a functional aspect as well as 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 its nature. Both. Yeah. Any questions? I hope this first session doesn't go like this. Yeah.
If you could a little bit elaborate difference between consciousness and awareness.
Okay. In the West, particularly those academic world, if you talk about awareness or the mind, they will immediately reject you. Only consciousness, they will accept. If you say consciousness, oh, okay, I understand what he is talking about. As soon as if you say mind, awareness, I'm talking about those scientists, those academics, then they will say, oh, he's coming from strange area. So anyway, that's I'm just talking about. So now the point is this: in terms of the the consciousness in English, in Tibetan is Sheba, and awareness in Tibetan is Rigpa. That's how the scholars translate it from Tibetan into English. So what's different between the consciousness and the awareness? For me, it is different terms, and they give slightly different taste of the mind, but fundamentally, there's no difference. So when you talk about awareness, it may give us flavor of function of the mind, aware of things.
Knowing quality of it.
Yeah, knowing quality of the mind, aspect of the mind. That's what I understand. In Tibetan, that's what we get, Rigpa. Particularly in what you call the Eastern Tibet, even in everyday colloquial term, they will use, did you see that guy? They will use the same term, Riksonghe, Rigpa. So it has this, in Tibetan term, Rigpa carries the more functional aspect of the mind than the Sheba consciousness. And in English it might be the same, but I've been saying this all the time. I mean, many complain to myself. I talk when I lead classes like this. I talk in English, but many of these English words, terms, does not give. They don't give me the real feeling, like the mother tongue. If the mother tongue is English, when I say in Tibetan, I'm not saying all the time, but as soon as I start to think more in deep in these terms, these terms themselves give me some kind of feeling. But English, no, because I learned this much later. So I'm repeating those scholars, terms. Hmm? You have a question?
I had a question. What you were talking in the beginning about how we have this great fortune right now,
Yeah.
and that's not going to last forever.
Mhm.
And but you said this is not about fear mongering or scaremongering.
Yeah.
But in general, if you look at the news or the world situation and seeing how kind of things don't seem to be going in a very good direction, degenerating, how do you not let yourself kind of fall into fear or depression about that? In terms of like this, feels like this great fortune we have is kind of
Yes.
showing the less opportunity we have to
Yes.
potentially practice
Mhm.
in the future.
Yes,
This
I do.
sense of time is running out.
Mm. I mean, I deliberately brought that issue, saying it is helpful to understand how fortunate that we are, even though the world is going in a very challenging time. And from my own, feelings or experience, when I hear these sad news by nature, created by nature, recently there were lots of people lost their life due to the flood in Indonesia, in Sri Lanka, in many parts, and there are also many people suffered with the man-made disasters or so forth. When we think about those, that brings very unpleasant or difficult, sometimes have some sad situation or news, even stay a few hours or even days. But to counteract those, if you bring more realistic, how we are. I'm not saying these are the unfortunate people, but currently how we are. And that sometimes brings the good balance. On the one hand, there are disasters, difficulties. On the other hand, if I had, what I have here and now, which is fortunate, so that's why, and otherwise, I don't know what to do. This is why I use the term, and it is not scaremongering. I'm not scared. The term is, I didn't say this for what's happening outside there. I'm saying when we reflect on this life is impermanent, it brings fear. Soon as if we reflect on that, it brings fear. And I heard these kind of statements, or these are the scaremongering, creating fears in the people's mind. But if we reflect on properly, this reflection will be very, very powerful to bring positive things within ourselves. Something which must use this fortunate life without wasting, some kind of determination. Anyway, now is time for the fortunate lunch.